The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is what I wish the Star Wars prequels had been. I should start by saying that I am a very, very big fan of the Hunger Games franchise, both the novels and the film adaptation. Like all of the Hunger Games movies except for the first one, Francis Lawrence came back to return this one, but with an entirely new cast, because of course, this one was set 64 years before the first Hunger Games movie. This almost kind of feels like a sci-fi dystopian version of The Godfather, where you have this young idealistic guy who maybe has a bit of a, not a great streak at the beginning, but is, really bright, and it really wants to better his situation for himself and his family, because he comes from a very affluent family that has fallen on very hard times. That is, of course, the person who would become President Snow, who we see as someone who is graduating from academy, essentially high school, trying to get into college. And this film, while being very standalone, it doesn't feel like it's like the Fantastic Beasts movie where they just kind of cobbled together a story from nothing. It feels like a really interesting character study on this character that would become a really terrible person in the later films, but a very, very interesting villain. So many of the lines that Donald Sutherland would give as President Snow are given so much more weight by the character arc that he goes on in this movie. His romance that he has really informs a lot of the ways that he deals with Katniss, and a line that I always think of is when he tells Katniss, "Make me believe it." Because in this movie, his romance with a performer, he questions whether any of that was real. And the ending, which I won't spoil, but I will say is very ambiguous, puts you in his really deranged headspace. You see him kind of following the path of his father, who died during the war, during the rebellion that that this country was fighting against. But you also hear mention of his mother, who died during childbirth. He was apparently supposed to be a twin. His father, who was a general in this war, is told to be a very harsh, unforgiving person who had no mercy for his enemies. While what we hear about his mother, on the other hand, is she seems to have been a very kind individual. And we see that Snow really could have followed either of these paths, but he ultimately chooses the much darker and horrific one. The film also does a lot of great stuff from a world-building perspective. You see the way that the games transform from kind of a minor thing to the absolutely horrific sideshow that they become in the later films, and Snow's role in all of that. And ultimately, this leading to his quest for power, his way that he would just snuff out anyone who challenged him, even those he considered his best friends. I also think it addressed the problem really well of what do you do when you are trying to tell a story of the future that is also the past from the perspective of the later films, aka happens in a long time from when we live now, but a time before the movies that we saw. The way that it addresses this, I think, is really smart, and it kind of leans into a retro-futuristic style, a kind of style of what we thought the future was going to look like in the 1950s. It gives it a pretty unique look, and one that fits in very well with that world, making it feel both futuristic and something of the past. So overall, like I said, I'm a pretty easy target for these movies. I'm a huge Hunger Games fan. I even wrote some fan fiction back in the day. But what did you guys think? Did you guys like this adaptation? Did you guys like the movie? Are you fans of the other movies? Let me know. I'm Derek. Check out my podcast, Underrated, for more good stuff. Thanks again.